$500 drone, a $5 million tank. In the next 16 minutes, one of them wins decisively, and it is not the one you would put your money on. For 100 years, the answer to firepower on the battlefield was always the same. More armor, bigger guns, a bigger budget. The side that could afford the heavier, more expensive machine usually won the exchange. That entire logic has just been broken. And it was broken by a weapon you could assemble on a kitchen table from parts ordered online. This is not a gimmick or a one-off lucky hit posted online. On the battlefields of the last few years, cheap drones have destroyed more tanks, guns, and armored vehicles than any other single weapon in the war. A machine that costs less than a phone has quietly become the most effective tank killer on Earth. So in this briefing, we break down 4 things. First, how a few $100s of hobby parts becomes a precision-guided weapon. Second, why the armor that stopped almost everything else simply cannot stop this. Third, the desperate and expensive race to jam these drones out of the sky. And fourth, what it means for every army on Earth, now that cheap has finally beaten expensive. Start with the machine that ruled the battlefield for a century, the main battle tank. 60 tons of layered composite armor and a high-velocity gun built on one simple idea. It could take a hit and keep fighting. For decades, the whole story of ground war was a duel between gun and armor. A new anti-tank rocket appeared, and engineers answered with thicker plate. Shaped charges appeared, and they bolted on reactive armor that fired back. Every threat was met with a heavier, smarter shell of protection, and for a very long time, that arms race held. The tank stayed king of the battlefield. But that protection came at a staggering price. A modern main battle tank costs several $1 million before it ever fires a shot. Add a trained crew of 3 or 4, years of training, fuel by the ton, and a long tail of spare parts and maintenance, and every single tank becomes a national investment rolling slowly across the field. Losing one hurts badly. Now look at what is hunting it. A first-person view drone, an FPV, built from the very same parts hobbyists race for sport. A carbon frame, 4 motors, a battery, a camera, and a radio link. A few $100s in total. Strap an explosive warhead to the front, and you have a guided weapon for roughly the price of a weekend hobby. For years, all of this was just theory in defense journals. Then, in the wars of the 2020s, it became the defining weapon of the battlefield almost overnight. Soldiers sitting in trenches, flying drones through cheap video goggles, began destroying tanks, artillery pieces, and vehicles worth thousands of times more than the drone they were flying. Whole units started keeping score in confirmed kills posted from the drone's own camera, and the tallies ran into the thousands. What had been a curiosity became, in a single year, the thing both sides feared most. The exchange rate of war had just inverted. For the first time, the cheap thing reliably beat the expensive thing. And once that becomes true, every plan, every budget, and every doctrine built on the opposite assumption quietly starts to crack. So what exactly is this weapon? Take one apart. At its core, an FPV drone is a flying camera. 4 motors on a light carbon frame, a battery, and a camera that streams live video straight back to a pilot wearing goggles. It was designed for racing, which means it is absurdly fast and agile. able to thread through a window or chase a moving vehicle at well over 100 kilometers an hour. The intelligence is not on the drone itself. It is the human flying it. A pilot, often several kilometers away in a trench or a buried dugout, sees exactly what the drone sees and steers it by hand all the way to the moment of impact. It is cheap, simple hardware, guided by a person who can think, react, and adapt in real time. On its own, the drone is harmless. The lethality comes entirely from what gets strapped to the front. Usually a warhead, very often a repurposed anti-tank rocket grenade pulled straight from existing stockpiles. A few hundred grams of explosive, shaped to do one specific job extremely well. That shape is everything. A shaped charge focuses its entire blast into a thin, hypervelocity jet of metal that punches through armor like a needle through cloth. It does not need to be large to work. It needs to strike the right spot at the right angle. And unlike a missile fired from far away, a drone can fly its warhead in by hand and place it exactly where it wants. There is also a more polished and expensive cousin, the loitering munition. A small fixed-wing drone that can circle a patch of sky for a long time, hunting, and then dive onto a target the moment it appears. It costs more than a garage-built FPV, but it is still a tiny fraction of what it destroys, flies farther, and is considerably harder to stop. And here is the part that truly rewrites warfare. These drones can be built by the thousand, almost anywhere, with a small workshop and a steady supply of parts. No precision factories, no exotic materials, no decade-long procurement program. The weapon is not just cheap to buy. It is endlessly, locally reproducible, faster than the enemy can destroy them. Precision used to be the single most expensive thing in all of warfare, locked inside guided missiles that cost $1 million each to build. A drone now delivers that exact same precision for a few hundred. That, in one sentence, is the entire revolution. A tank is still very heavily armored. So why can't it simply shrug these off, the way it shrugged off so much else? Because armor is not equal all the way around the vehicle. A tank carries its thickest protection at the front, where it expects to fight other tanks head-on. The sides are noticeably thinner, and the top, the roof, and the engine deck is the thinnest of all. For almost the entire history of the tank, nothing meaningful attacked from straight above, so there was simply no reason to weigh it down with heavy roof armor. A drone attacks exactly there. It climbs, then comes down from above onto the one surface that was never built to take a hit, and drives its shaped charge jet straight through the thin roof into the crew compartment and the stored ammunition below. The thickest, best armor in the world is sitting right there, pointed uselessly in the wrong direction. In practice, the kill looks like this. A small reconnaissance drone spots a vehicle and passes its position to an FPV pilot waiting nearby. The strike drone launches, races low across the ground to stay below the skyline and out of sight, lines up behind or above the target, and dives. From first spotted to destroyed can be a matter of minutes. The crew's options are terrible. A tank cannot outrun a drone that flies several times its top speed. It cannot easily hide, because the sky overhead is full of cameras patiently searching for it. And buttoned up inside a sealed steel box, the crew very often does not even see the small thing that kills them until the final second, if at all. The psychological toll of that is its own weapon, knowing that at any moment, from any direction, something you cannot hear or see might be lining up on your roof. And they rarely come one at a time. If the first drone is jammed, misses, or is shot down, the operator simply sends 3 more behind it. When each one costs only a few $100s, you can afford to throw a dozen at a single vehicle and still come out massively, absurdly ahead on cost. Run the numbers, and they are brutal. A few $100s of drone to destroy a multi-million-dollar vehicle is an exchange ratio of thousands to 1. No defense budget anywhere on Earth can win a trade that runs that far in the wrong direction for very long. The tank was not defeated by a better tank. It was defeated by a target it was never designed to fight, arriving from a direction it was never designed to protect. So how do you actually stop them? The race to answer that is now one of the most intense in all of modern war. The first line of defense is invisible, electronic warfare. Because most FPV drones are flown over a radio link, you can jam that link, flooding the frequencies with noise until the video feed cuts to static and the controls go dead, dropping the drone out of the sky. Jammers now ride on vehicles, on buildings, and even strapped to individual soldiers. But jamming only started another arms race, and it is moving fast. Drones jumped to new frequencies, then to fiber-optic cables that physically cannot be jammed, unspooling a hair-thin thread of glass behind them as they fly. And the next step is already arriving. Drones that lock onto a target with onboard vision and finish the attack entirely on their own, with no radio link left to jam at all. On the vehicles themselves, the fixes are far cruder. Cages, slat armor, nets, and improvised metal screens welded over the top and turret, all meant to catch a drone before it reaches the hull. Crews have nicknamed them cope cages, and some tanks now disappear entirely under a shaggy lattice of bars and chain link. They do help, but they add weight, they block the crew's vision, they make the tank harder to operate, and a patient pilot simply waits and aims for a gap, or sends a second drone through the hole the first one tears open. And every one of these defenses costs far more than the threat it is trying to counter. A capable jammer or a layered active protection system that shoots threats down is genuinely expensive. You are spending tens of thousands, sometimes millions, to stop something that costs a few hundred. The defender is losing the cost curve and losing it badly. Every counter so far has proven temporary. The attacker adapts in weeks with cheaper parts, faster than the defender can design, build, and field the fix. For now, the advantage sits firmly with the cheap thing in the sky, step back from the individual tank. And the consequences are far bigger than any single vehicle. War is sliding back toward a contest of mass and production, not a handful of exquisite, expensive machines, but whichever side can build and field the most cheap, good enough weapons, fastest. Industrial output and the ability to churn out hardware matter again, the way they did in the world wars, after decades of small professional armies. Precision strike used to belong to a tiny club of wealthy militaries who could afford guided missiles. Now a small team with a workshop, a 3D printer, and an internet connection can build a guided weapon in a basement. That monopoly on precision is gone, and it is never coming back. Every serious military on Earth is now rethinking the basics. Disperse your forces. Hide. Stop concentrating enormous value into a few huge, obvious targets. The expensive platforms are not useless, far from it, but they can no longer move and mass in the open as if the cheap, patient things in the sky are not always watching and waiting. The real lesson of this war is not that the tank is dead. It is that cheap, smart, and many has finally caught up with expensive, strong, and few. And once that race is truly on, history says it does not run backward. We have looked at the machines that project power, and now at the cheap thing that quietly takes it away. Next time, what happens when these drones start thinking for themselves and the human in the trench is taken out of the loop entirely? Watch the sky. It is already getting crowded.